Does a driver's watch have to be a chronograph? Does it have to have a tilted dial oriented towards the driver for legibility? And here I have the watch that challenges these conventions. This is the Depancel Driver. It measures in at 39mm wide, 44mm lug-to-lug length, and only 13.5mm thick in the mid-case. Fully constructed out of stainless steel, it is an integrated sport watch that, by convention, looks like a chronograph but isn't a chronograph. Instead, it has a functional day, month, and date indicator, combined with a timing bezel in 12-hour gradations. If you're the type of watch collector or enthusiast that feel that dive watches should only be used for diving, and you feel that chronographs should only be used to measure, let's say, speed, time, or distance on a racetrack, well, this is not the watch for you. It breaks that convention, and I think it's better for it. Let me explain. What you get instead is a late 60s motorsport inspired design with that bright hit of orange on the seconds hand, which, funny fact, I do prefer to run the chronograph hand and sync it to my seconds hand on traditional chronograph watches, so having the running seconds be this bright orange large seconds hand is kind of fun. What you're getting instead is a domed sapphire crystal in a 100-meter water resistance case with a screw-down crown, and also very interesting 60s to early 70s angular case and bracelet design. This is an integrated sport bracelet watch. The watch retails in at $855 US and comes in two different variants with a rubber strap or a bracelet, and this variant is the Sunray Blue with dark blue bezel insert. There is also a black and red Coke colorway with a black dial as well. Powering the watch is the Miyota 9122 movement, 4 Hz, 28,800 vibrations per hour, 40-hour power reserve, and it is featuring a day, date, and calendar function. The recessed button above the crown is to do the month adjustment, and we'll talk about that later. The crown is odd shaped. It's kind of like a nut. And I know it sounds a little bit strange, but it has no knurling. There's an orange anodized ring around it to contrast with the orange seconds hand. Very nice touch, just a little bit difficult to operate and get a good purchase on. I've got a nifty new tool to help me resize bracelets and also remove links. It has a little pinpoint as well that I can use for the month adjustment on this watch. It's the Imperial Slide Catch, and I bought this from my friend Ben from Imperial Watches recently. Check them out if you're interested in this slide catch tool. Now, as I said, that recessed button on the side of the case is for the month adjustment operation. The Miyota movements were never stellar, great-looking movements on their own, but it does help when a company provides a bit of embellishment, and that's what Depancel did here. They provided their company logo that is etched into the rotor, as well as a grid motif to fill out the rest of the space on the rotor itself. The workhorse of a movement that is the Miyota 9000 series has always had very good finishing, in my opinion, for such a simple movement. You have here the Geneva striping within the bridges and the base plate. I find that the overall cleanliness of the movement has to be remarked. There are no traces of carelessness in assembling this movement. The dark blue bezel insert, it is aluminum by the way, perfectly contrasts the Sunray dial. It is a bi-directional bezel with 60 clicks, positive action, very minimal play, feels great to operate, as often 60 click bezels do, and I also prefer it being bi-directional so that you may track an additional time zone. Being that it is also gradated in hours, I find it quite useful for quick and easy time telling when you're glancing at the watch from a distance on the wrist. On my 6.4-inch wide wrist, the watch is framed quite nicely. I have a flat wrist, meaning that integrated sport bracelet watches don't always fit very nice if they don't have at least half links or some form of adjustment on the wrist. I find that overall the case shape being fairly flat, but the shorter 44mm lug-to-lug length definitely helps in centering the watch on the flat side of my wrist, ensuring that there is minimal gaps between the bracelet and the edges of my wrist. With the exception of that polished edge above the mid-case, there is no other polished elements on the watch. Entirely satinated brush finishing on the bracelet, upper part of the lug, and there's only a tiny little plaque on the side of the case to denote the serial number. I could do without that, to be honest with you. Having said that, the bracelet is 22.5mm wide from the watch head, tapering to 18mm at the clasp, which lends for quite aggressive tapering that helps in the wearability of this watch. Depancel has opted for bracelet pins for the individual links, and to remove them, the butterfly clasp is actuated with a twin trigger release. On both sides, you're able to close the bracelet inwards. Comfort is pretty good. I find that the bracelet has just enough flexibility to conform to the shape of the wrist. However, if you've got a smaller wrist at under 6 inches, you will struggle to get this watch to be comfortable, as this tends to be a perennial problem for most integrated sport bracelet watches that have limited flexibility in the links. The luminescence of the dial is pretty good, as it is using Superluminova C3 within the dial indices. Good longevity, fairly reactive and bright. I find that the longevity of the lume, having left it on my nightstand at around midnight, waking up at around 8 o'clock in the morning, it is just barely bright enough to make out the hours. This is a watch that gets better as you get in closer and observe the fine details. The blue sunray dial has a circular texture to it, met with chrome applique high polished detailing on the subdials. Even the date window is delicately applied with a silver chrome surround. The last month and day of the year are denoted in orange to match the orange seconds hand and the automatic text motif above the date window. It's a handsome touch. The baton hands are period correct, and the subdial hands are in bright white for high legibility. What are my final thoughts on the Depancel Driver? I feel that this watch is better suited to be worn on a rubber strap for maximum comfort, just being that the butterfly clasp is always going to be complicated for you to dial in comfort on the wrist if you've got a smaller wrist. I think Depancel has knocked it out of the park in terms of its proportions of the watch, the overall use of color, and their retro design. A part of me yearns for Depancel to take this case, this dial, and turn it into a manual wound chronograph, keeping the proportions the same. It would be a knockout of a watch. Taking the Depancel Driver as it is, a very easy to read watch, functional in everyday use with the day, date, and calendar, I find a lot more useful than a chronograph on the day-to-day basis. Less so of a fidget toy, more so of an everyday wearer. Thank you for watching today's video.